All right, welcome to the Joy Experience, sponsored by Svensson Hypnosis, established in 2006, empowering clients to tap into the power within to improve their health, reclaim their joy, achieve their goals and dreams, and live more prosperous, engaging lives. I'm your host, Sharon Spencer, founder of Svensson Hypnosis. Each episode in the Joy Experience, you're going to experience an empowering, powerful tool to create the life that you want. A healthier life, a more joyful life, filled with engaging things to do, purposeful activities, and more abundance and prosperity. The focus is going to be on what I find are just mind-blowing tools. I've been blown away by what I've been able to do in my own life and what I've seen other people do in their lives. And those tools are hypnosis, meditation, breath work, neuro-linguistic programming, and some other beautiful methods. So joining me today is my expert guest, Kay Cooke. She is a mind coach, brain trainer, and holistic therapist. And one of the tools that she uses is that NLP, the neuro-linguistic programming. And that in particular, I just find fascinating. She is going to lead us in what she calls a happy brain session. So I'm very excited about that. So first off, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and sharing your gifts and talents. So I really appreciate that. To tell you a little bit more about Kay, to give a little bit more of a background in who she helps, Kay helps people of all ages, so adults, children, with common problems such as anxieties, fears, phobias, bullying, performance anxiety, relationship difficulties, school pressure, learning difficulties, depression, and the different labels like ADHD, dyslexia, and she helps with trauma, bereavement, suicidal feelings, and self-harm. Wow, that's quite the list, Kay. That's beautiful. So one of the things that I have not worked with her personally, but I've listened to different videos and clips, and I can really see that she does powerful work. And one of them that really spoke to me was this one titled The Color Coded, I think. I may be getting that wrong, but it was about this child who was having 45-minute temper tantrums. And you worked with him just one time. This just kind of blows me away. And you helped give him tools so that he could move past that to that centered and peaceful place. It's like, wow, every child should be able to know how to do this, every adult. And that really resonated with me. In fact, I shared it with my daughter, because her 5-year-old has sometimes temper tantrums that can last that long. And it's like she just gets so into that negative energy that she just doesn't know how to shut it down until it's almost like she collapses with exhaustion. So yeah, I was very interested in that. So first off, Kay, tell us a little bit about how you came to this work, and maybe share a different example of how you help people.
Oh, well, that's a huge pot of gold, Sharon. I'm not sure exactly where to start. So first up, I've always been really interested in self-development and well-being, and my various career paths and study programs. I've always been curious about the mind, the capability of humans, human potential, and so on. So my route to what I do now was kind of always set as a pathway, but forced a little bit by a particular life event that I had, which built on some other not so good life events. and I could feel my mind and my behaviours slipping once more into what had previously been clinical depression and so on. And I just thought,
Okay.
no, I'm not doing that anymore. Yeah, enough. And so I heard about, had previously heard about something called neurolinguistic programming. I'd read bits over the years. I'd always been very interested in psychology and behavioural work, so had read a bit about it. And actually, a client of mine at the time in another business had just taken part in a program, a neurolinguistic programming training. And he was raving about it, and I was like, yeah, I know all about that. Yeah, I've read
Mhm.
about it, which of course is easy to assume.
Right.
And so as a result of that, I took the first training, and that was it. I was hooked. It began to unfold inner aspects of myself that I just wanted to know more and more and
I
more.
love what you, I think it's on your book blurb, which by the way, she's a published author and you should check out her book, where you describe the practice of neurolinguistic programming. You say the practice of reorganizing your thinking, feeling language, and behavior to produce more rewarding results. And I just and I love what you're saying about you did not want to go back to that hell anymore of that clinical depression. So yeah, I love that. Fascinating. So tell me more.
So one of my career moments had been as a teacher. So I'm a qualified teacher, and so the way that a human brain learns was endlessly fascinating to me. I also had, I have 5 children in fact, but a couple of them had some labels and so-called difficulties. And I was very interested in drawing out the best of them, for them, through them, by them. The college that I lectured in, I took a particular interest in how youngsters could be more than just the education system and so on. So what neurolinguistic programming did for me was gave me a structure to hang everything I had previously known, experienced, studied, and so on. It gave me a very strong framework about thoughts, feelings, and behaviours. And it began to be a skeleton, if you like, for me to add other things in. So over the years, I have studied, qualified, trained in a whole range of other complementary alternative practices. But it comes back to sitting on this framework of what is happening inside our brains at different neurological levels of existence. And it really doesn't matter which filter you come from, whether you look at it as the explanation of the esoteric or consciousness, or whether you look at it as a simple scientific model for how our nervous system perceives, processes, and outputs sensory information. It doesn't really matter where you come from. That framework, for me, was just magical. And
Oh, I love that. Can you give some examples, just how it helped you? Like, for instance, um, you say clinical depression, and then you gave examples of your kids. What were those concrete results that you saw? How did it take you to a different place? And what was that different place?
Well, I think in terms of my own children, by the time I had really mastered all of this, my children were grown up, or grown up
Of
enough
course.
to not want to, be involved. And,
Yeah.
in my early naive days, I went out to sort the world out. And of course, when you do that, you naturally get a woo. a response. So
Yeah.
I learned very quickly that to respect other people's rights for their own territory, their own boundary conditions, and to back off. So I wouldn't
So kind of
necessarily.
not pushing or forcing, but it's you wanted to take that path of empowering.
But what it did for me is made me a better human being. So that made me more tolerant, more understanding, more resilient, more skilled at basic communication. How that rolled out in the wider world is, I suppose, where I began to work with clients and build a career in this new way, because I just wanted to share it. I've been a teacher; it's my nature to share, and so I could build on that. Your question about an example uh, of it applying, I really don't think that there's a specific example of a turnaround with my children, but perhaps a little bit with my stepchildren. So neurologically, I now know that my children and I had created our own triggers and responses, and we were fairly set in those early days. But I was bonding with stepchildren, and that gave me another level of
Oh, okay.
communication. So for example, one of the simple quick wins linguistically is being clear about whether you're trying to motivate a child or get compliance from them, because they're very different things.
Yeah.
So compliance would be empty the dishwasher and do it now. Motivation might be we're a team, guys, and you'll get the job. And
I totally get that. I watch my grandkids and
we're
need
together.
to get them off to preschool and their kindergarten, and totally see the difference between I just want you to do it compliance and that it's like, oh, they're happy to. Yeah.
But having that awareness, I think, is really important.
Yes.
So then you look at, okay, so some of the language patterns from a particular model in NLP enables you to run with a machine that's already running. So you would say, for example, something like, so once you've emptied the dishwasher, then we'll have the story. So you begin to work with their flow, with
Oh,
their
okay.
subconscious mind. So you say, when you've emptied the dishwasher, presupposes in their heads that they are going to do it. So you take their attention from the task to what follows it. So you say, once
Nice.
you've emptied the dishwasher, then we'll have that lovely story. So their focus then is on the lovely story.
Well, and that might be a nice place to focus in on our happy brain session, helping me become a better grandparent, especially when I come up with different things like temper tantrums or no, I'm just going to wear my pajamas to school, things like that. Or the fighting with the sibling and um, so I love that. I would imagine that you probably not only noticed a difference with your stepkids, but did you find, because you said it made you kind of a better person, did you find your relationship with your adult children started to change and just feel more softer, maybe more positive?
Very much so. I think because having the awareness of my own filters, the purpose of asking a question, the purpose of giving an instruction or making a request, when you have that self-awareness, then it stops us working on autopilot.
Mm.
because neurologically we just repeat patterns that
Yes.
our nervous system is
Uh-huh.
used to doing. Our autopilot just fires off automatically, because that's what we've practiced. We call that personality, but actually it's just a neurological map of pathways,
Yeah.
electricity, chemistry that's been used to firing in certain patterns. So when we change those patterns on purpose, then we give ourselves more choice, more freedom. And recognizing, first of all, your own patterns is enormously enlightening, but also noticing other people's patterns. It helps it to be less personal, rather than assuming we know what other people mean or what their intention might be. We can start to look and hear for the patterns of their autopilot and realize that it's easy for us to react on
Yeah.
our autopilot until you make a conscious choice to do something different.
Oh, I love that. Well, that let's go right into our happy brain session. I just love the name, happy brain. It just makes me happy saying it. Uh, and yeah, if that was something that you felt would be a good fit to help me as I look after my 4 and 5-year-old grandchildren, I would love that.
Okay. Well, the happy brain, which is a model I've created that kind of leads us into neurolinguistic programming. So I've drawn from lots of other models of science, philosophy, education, and so on to create a package called Happy Brain. And the simple version of the model, I've got a little card to show you there. So you can see that there are 3 brain parts.
Yeah.
The simplest model of to show you
Oh,
happy
and I
brain,
like what the next generation of thinking. Beautiful.
which,
So,
which is an ambiguity. And because are we talking about the next generation, or are we talking about children, or are we talking about our own next generation thinking? So
oh, and I was
ambiguity,
kind of taking it as both. Us
exactly.
starting a new era, a new generation of thought, as well as passing that on to the kids to establish that new pattern of thinking. Yeah,
So
beautiful.
we would start with just bringing awareness to, and I do this with all of my clients, either through a poster or a bit of paper or something,
Oh,
and
okay.
obviously in my book as well. But if we start to think about the bottom of the brain, I've got a little character here to sort of represent the bottom of the brain, and in our model, I wonder if I've got a picture for you.
So
We can
is
think
the bottom of the brain kind of the reptilian?
exactly, I was
Oh,
just about
okay.
to remind you, yeah, picture of the reptilian brain. So we've got this kind of picture here for you of your reptile.
Uh-huh.
And most people are pretty aware that right down in the bottom of your brain, you've got this automatic behavior from the reptilian brain, which is immensely powerful, keeps us alive, but it is also very simple, and it's not really interested in us as personalities, but it is interested in our survival. And so it's either nice and relaxed, or it's really on guard. And when it's on guard because it feels threatened,
Mhm.
then we get fight, flight, freeze, fawning, fornication. Oh, there are hundreds of F's that come out of that stress response. And you can have a look at this little ball as I use this to symbolize a particular part of the brain. It really doesn't matter, but the principle here is, we can have a smooth, harmonious thrive brain, or it can go into full survival mode. And
Oh,
when it's
okay.
full survival mode, when that reptile fires off into full survival mode, whichever F it takes, it pumps the body full of chemistry and, you know, the brain chemistry of survival, the fats, the sugars, the oxygen, because it's saying physiologically, it's saying take an action.
Yeah.
So we know that. That then feeds up into the next part of the brain. So we've got a little example here. So we've got the lower brain, then we move up to the orange mammalian brain. This is just a model taken from other models, but it is useful. So we think about, so we've got the reptilian brain down here, then we think about this mammalian brain, which in our model we think of as the emotional brain.
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose of this emotional brain is to either, it's to pass outwards the sensations that are coming up and let them be expressed. And this is all part of our basic survival needs. So when you were a baby, or you know, a small child needs to be able to express itself. I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm uncomfortable. It needs to be able to express itself emotionally to do that. And there are good reasons for doing that, to connect with its primary caregivers, to be able to express itself. And then, depending on the response from the primary caregiver, it gets a stimulus response and it feeds that information back down into the lower brain. So those two parts of the brain are working harmoniously when they're in a smooth, thrive, relaxed form. There is an undulating chemistry. The brain waves are regular, coherent. The muscles are responsive. Everything runs smoothly. But for whatever reason, when there's an alert, then they sort of fragment and don't work too well.
Oh, okay.
The third part of the brain, the top, the thinking mind, which in our little thing, we can think of this little guy here. His job, saying it's not gender specific, my little characters, but you know, the job of this guy is to lead us forward. So the job of this guy is to lead this brain on a journey. So it needs to know where it's going. So it plans. And based on what it's experienced from inside previously, it learns to predict the world around it. So based on the stimulus responses that it's had over time, it learns to predict things so that it can lead us forward and help us to evolve. It also needs to make sense of the world, so it finds meaning. And this is where we begin to uncover some of the difficulties that we have with our own thinking. So a sensation is created for whatever reason, and the emotion is heightened, and this part of the brain says, oh yeah, that's because it means this.
Uh-huh.
And so start to look at what happens with children. An exercise that we would run in the playground is Jenny looked at me in a certain way. I felt bad.
I have heard that one from my own grandkids many a time.
Exactly.
She's looking at me wrong, or she said something that isn't nice.
Because I think it means. So it means that they're looking down at what's happened before in their neurological map. They're looking for a regular pattern and they go, aha, now I know what that means.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So it's not true, but they think it is. And
Yeah.
when they think they know what it means, they go, and the brain settles again. So it's a great way to settle your own brain, is to come up with a story that you think it means something. But of course, then you go out into the world and realize that that meaning isn't true. So
Yeah.
one of the first things that we can do with children is to have them
Well, and
begin.
just to throw in, this also sounds like adults. I mean, we do the same thing too.
Absolutely. And in NLP, we call that, for example, a mind read or a distortion pattern. It doesn't matter. The important thing that does matter is how we can begin to work with the other person. So if you hear a person saying, she hates me, she's a bitch, she always does it that
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
um, you know that that isn't a truth. You know it's their narrative,
Yeah.
that's the meaning they've come up with. So what we would do with children is help them to help each other and to rehearse just some simple questions like, so what's the worst that that could mean, and what's the best it could mean, and what's somewhere in the middle, what's most likely. So you, instead of them always going A means B, you then get them to go, well, actually, it could also mean this or that or this or that. So you begin to expand their thinking. So
Nice.
when they say, you know, Jenny hates me, and you say, okay, what makes you think that? You know, what are the clues? What is the sensory experience that's being distorted? Although you wouldn't say that to a child, but you're listening for it, and you go, okay, because she frowned at you. Okay, so she gave you a mean look. Actually, a mean look is still not accurate. A mean look means what? So what's the sensory experience? So you get them to start to be clearer about the difference between sensory experience and interpretation. So, so the sensory experience might be, well, she had a frown and she had a glum face and she was like this. So I know that that means she doesn't like me or she's angry with me.
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. So, and you would mirror that back. Okay, so she had a frown and she had a glum mouth and her shoulders were like that. What is the worst that that could mean? And they come up with whatever they come up with. Well, what's the best it could mean? What else could it mean? And I often throw in, and one of something I wrote about in the book, something completely abstract, like maybe she had a tummy ache, or maybe she needed a poo, because at that moment
Uh-huh.
you take their brains somewhere else. We call that a pattern interrupt, because their
Nice.
brains are used to seeing something, hearing something, and making an assumption based on that,
Mm-hmm.
and not going anywhere else. And what we want to do is to take their brains off in other directions to expand their choices of thinking.
Oh, I love
And
that. Well, and it makes me feel better about what I'm doing with my grandkids when, like, one of the little ones says, she says my underwear's ugly. And then it's like, well, why do you think she said that? Because, oh, she would like to have that underwear, or she feels jealous about not having it, or something like that.
And again, I would want to explore that. You know, one of the things that Dr. Richard Bandler says, a co-founder of NLP, you know, we don't listen well. He says that about 90% of good communication is listening.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just listening with our ears, it's listening with our whole being. And that is an incredible skill. We're so busy, I'm generalizing, I know, but we're so busy inside our own heads that we take up our bandwidth, our capacity to be present with somebody and really listen to what they're saying. And that causes a lot of trouble with good communication. So if your grandchild says, my underwear is ugly, or her underwear is ugly, what does ugly mean? what actually does that mean, and what does that mean, and what does that mean? And so we're beginning to drill down to get more information, to find out more.
Yeah.
And the strangest thing, I'm saying strange, one of the most powerful things I've discovered with my work with children over the years is, let me reverse engineer it. So at the adult end of the spectrum, the people I work with in adulthood who have a whole range of mental and emotional difficulties, if you reverse engineer it back to childhood, you can see how those poor communication with self and with others have evolved over time. And so the work that I've done with children and captured it, I have thousands of pieces of beautiful work from children. All the evidence is there in the early days, like in the exercises we run, like, you see something, you hear something, you feel bad because I think it means, and they'll write it.
Yeah.
And they'll say something like, I see my friend frowning at me, I feel bad because I think I'm going to have to move school. Just, it's not logical to us, but it makes sense to them.
Yeah.
Because their brains are already catastrophizing. And now, if that pattern of thinking isn't challenged and eased into a different way over time, you create this tin hat, this cement wall, this keep out territorial activity. So that limits people. And some of the things that children say are really very revealing, but they're usually skimmed over by an adult.
So would it be helpful, do you think, for the audience if I kind of played the role of one of my grandkids, and then you played the role that would be ideal that I played into helping them get to a more empowered place to go beyond that limited thinking?
Possibly. The thing about the way I work is that the only thing I'm really interested in is the structure of somebody's thinking. So if I was working with you as my client, I would need it to be in real time, because I would need to understand how your eyes are accessing stimulating brain patterns, how your body changed, how your skin tone changed, the language that you use, the patterns, the tonality,
picking up on all of
that information helps me to understand the process that your brain's going through in order to create whatever the strategy is. But the problem with role play always is that it doesn't really work in the work that I do.
Okay.
So, but if it's helpful, I can give you a short example of a case study of a boy who I worked with quite a long time ago, 10 years ago, and he was about 10 at the time, and I worked in the classroom, and he of all the children throughout the day, he'd been really difficult. He'd been really just unhappy, out of sorts, non-compliant, just difficult, attention seeking, and so on. So I'd kind of clocked him, and at lunchtime, I asked the teacher about him, and she said, he used to be okay until he got to year 2, and then something happened, became difficult. So the teacher sort of just written him off, metaphorically, I guess, but had just said, well, that's just how he is, he's just difficult. And in the case study that I've written and published about this particular one, I've called him Adrian. Obviously that's not his real name. So the afternoon session, I had the children do an activity which is to draw their happy brain. Now, when you draw something, when you are creating something, you're working beautifully with the unconscious mind, whose language is metaphor and imagery. So it's a really deep way to connect, as well as using the whole brain, that kinesthetic, that movement and creative. It also, as an exercise, allows the children to be unique, and they see each other's drawings as completely different to each other. So there's that celebration of uniqueness.
Mhm.
And inevitably, some of the drawings throw up things that we can then follow up with a conversation, like a little girl who had an invisibility button. You kind of want to know a little bit more about that, for example. And so on and so forth. So there's all these beautiful things that come out of this very simple exercise. And that was the last exercise of that day. And all of the children were busy, and the girls, they tend to draw love hearts and lots of pink fluffy flowers. I know it's not topical to be gender specific, but that seems to be, or at least 10 years ago, that was what was happening in the classroom. And the boys tend to use pulleys and levers and stronger colours and lines and things. But this little boy, Adrian, he just sat with his arms folded, and he just said, I can't. I sat down next to him and I said, where's your drawing? He said, I can't. I said, okay, what stops you? There is a language pattern in there which forces the brain to think about what has stopped it, and what stopped you. And he said, I've got the devil in me. And if you press pause just on that process for a moment, whenever I tell this story, everybody goes, oh, because you're instantly making your pictures of what you think that means.
That's true.
But of course, my job is to keep it flowing. So I said, oh, that's so cool. So where on that paper, pointing to the paper, would you draw, implying he's going to draw, will you draw, implying he's going to draw, that little red guy? So linguistically, I'm already changing the pictures inside his head, because I'm validating his story, but at the same time, I'm distancing him from it by using the word that, because if you think that versus this feels really close, that feels further away. So I gave him some distance.
Nice.
Little red guy, I'm still acknowledging something that he says is true for him, but I'm minimizing,
making it smaller.
Red guy. Okay. So where is it? And he suddenly, his eyes kind of went into this crazy pattern, which we call eye accessing transderivational search, because the brain the eye muscles stimulate all the brain. He was looking around for the answer. And then he picked up a pen and he furiously drew this devil with a pitchfork and thunderbolts and black clouds and red gear and the whole thing. And I waited with him, and then he sat back and he said, see, there it is. I said, oh, that's so cool. But where is the balancer? And again, thinking about what's presupposed in that sentence,
leading him to that
there is one. I said, where is it? And I think I said something along the lines of, well, I'm a brain expert, so I know that it's there. I just can't see it yet. So me. And again, he sort of went, oh, and then he beamed. He absolutely came to life. He beamed and he said, it's a golden angel. And he drew that balancing part, this beautiful golden angel, and then that had broken his spell. He then went on to produce a beautiful drawing of his whole brain, and inside it there are two compartments, one with the devil and one with the angel. And there were all sorts of other aspects to that.
Well, I
But
loved
one of them.
how you led him to who he really is. That, yeah, he's the angel. He's the golden angel. That he really does want to be joyful and
Well, maybe so. I think the most important part of that for me was giving his brain somewhere else to go instead of getting stuck at the first hurdle. And the first hurdle was the idea that he was a devil or had a devil in him. And we can only guess at how that idea got into his head, and it really doesn't matter. But up until that moment, it had been limiting him. He couldn't go anywhere else with that thought. It gave him a bad
yeah,
feeling.
it was like a
It
wall.
limited his behavior. So by opening it up and giving his brain something else to consider, it gave him another freedom. Um,
Nice.
and also, in the big class feedback at the end of day, being able to say to all of the class, including the teachers, who here at some point has felt that, and this is all past tense for
Hmm.
his benefit, has felt that at some point or another they have had something like that little red guy inside their
Hmm.
brain. And I led with my hand up, the teacher then followed, and all of the children put their hand up. So again, we are diluting it for him, because again he flushed. He couldn't believe it because he felt that he was the only one, and
Yeah,
that is so limiting to a small
yeah,
child. So we have to make everything okay and lead them towards where
nice.
we want them to go to next.
Yeah, and to me, that's kind of everything about my practice. It's like you need to have the direction, the intent to go towards the joy, to actually feel good, and that's a big part of my practice too. It's like emotions; they're just our guidance. They're not anything to get stuck in or to guide you to that other place. How beautiful. Well, I'm sure there's people that are probably going to want to look you up, read your book, find out more about you, and work with you. I know I asked earlier, could people that didn't live where you lived work with you? And you said you did a lot of work online, even with children. So, yeah, let's take a few minutes to just, that's my alarm to keep me on track, to keep us under our time. So, yeah, share your website link. Tell us a little bit about your book, and how people can connect so they can work with you. Or maybe somebody is listening in. It's like, oh my gosh, she'd be perfect to speak at our event. So, yeah, give us a little, take a little time to give us some information on that.
Oh, thank you, Sharon. Well, first and foremost, my website is the Managing Excellence Group. So that's www.the-me-group.com. So me stands for Managing Excellence. So that's the-me-group.com.
And we'll put the different links on the bottom. So be sure to look at the notes so you can find her really easily.
I'm on LinkedIn, Kay Cooke, Facebook, a whole range of different pages, Managing Excellence Group, NLP Northumberland, Me Space, Happy Brain. I've got a number of different pages. I've got two YouTube channels. One is for Happy Brain Train, and the other is Managing Excellence. I work over internet, coaching, teaching. I give presentations. It just
Got
feels
lots
like
of hats.
I don't like that. The great thing that I would really love to take the opportunity just to highlight, please, is that my book, Happy Brain, Next Generation Thinking, the title, the subtitle of that is Using Play, Creativity and NLP to Supercharge Your Child's Thrive Drive. And it's all about building those structures of thrive. it's a great introduction to NLP, and if you are experienced in NLP, it really makes very specific what's happening in those different parts of the brain.
Is
We
that
think
going to be available like at Amazon, or where
it
can people
is,
get it?
yes. We're due to be published at the beginning of February, so it should be in hard copy through Biloba Press, but it will go to Amazon, I think, within 6 weeks of that. So it'll be on my website.
And is it going to be a good book for the lay person? Like, for instance, me wanting to help my grandkids, or dads and moms out there, and adults?
It's absolutely rammed with case studies, with exercises that you can do
Nice.
yourself or with children, and lots and lots of simple science to help you understand. It's had some fantastic reviews, pre publication reviews. So I'm very excited about it. It's
Yay, that's
birthing
exciting.
another child. It's
Wow, how fun. How long did it take you to write?
Uh, well, I've been attempting to write it for about 10 years. When I created Happy Brain as a project 10 years ago,
Uh-huh.
I had funding for something very specific, and came up with this model for a project in schools, a creative project to help overcome barriers to learning for children and
Mm.
teachers using play and creativity. So that's how A Happy Brain was born. And from the outset, I knew I had to write this as a book, but it just took me a long time to get going. So
Well, and I'm sure it's even more powerful because you have so much, it's you, when you were writing it, you probably were gathering up the different case studies, and that will make it even more powerful for people. So some things just have to marinate, and they take time. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your expertise. Uh, Thanks, listeners, for listening in. Be sure to check out our Facebook page, The Joy Experience. If you want to learn more about Svensson Hypnosis, go to svenssonhypnosis.com. And we also have a website where, if you want to catch up on the different episodes, if you don't want to go directly to podcast, you can go to the Joy Experience podcast.com. All right, this concludes this episode. Thanks everyone for joining in. May there be lots of joy in your life.